welcome to Senate Commerce Committee. Glad to be back after the snow, and we're going to hit it this week. And we have the first order of business is a hearing on our agency budgets. So Dylan will be walking us through this, and this is again part of the Ways and Means process of having each committee look at the budgets of each department, and then we will be making recommendations on the budget later this week. So keep that in mind and be thinking of any recommendations you may have as Dylan presents the information. Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Everyone should have a commerce budget before them. Looks like this. There's some pretty substantial changes and some reprioritization for the Economic Development Initiatives Fund as part of this budget. Not too many changes in 22, but some real big changes in 23. These are largely tied to decisions not to take the EDIF and put it into the State General Fund, which has been going on for a number of years. And they'll have some more EDIF available to start some new programs, and some of those enhancements are reflected as part of this budget request. So if you could open the document first to page 5. I did mention that there's been some changes to the budget analysis, so it focuses more on policy shifts and less on the sort of nuts and bolts, contractual services, capital outlay, stuff like that. But some of that old data is still, you can see here in this table. So if you have any curiosity about changes in expenditures for those, you can see that. If you look at the table for state general fund expenditures, you can see that one of the lines moves up rather aggressively, and the agency request is sort of flat, and that is going to be related to enhancements recommendations by the governor in the FY 2023 budget. And I'll talk about that when we get to it. And if you could please turn the page to page 6. I'll start with the FY 2022 approved budget. That was about $100 million and about $10,000 worth of SGF as part of the request. There was an SGF reappropriation of $6.6 million, resulting in an all funds budget of 106.8 and an SGF budget of 6.6 million. That $6.6 million was reappropriated, but these funds are derived from a transfer from federal funds intended to reimburse the Job Creation Program Fund for COVID-19 relief expenditures. It's a little clunky way of saying that effectively what they did is they spent JCPF during the COVID-19 pandemic to run some programs, and they're using SGF to sort of reimburse some of those that weren't, essentially related to direct JCPF programs, such as the HIRE program for restaurant workers. Moving to the agency estimate. The agency estimate includes 110.7. It's an increase of 3.9 million or 3.7% above the approved budget. So there's, I'm going to go ahead and move through these. You can see them in the chart as a summary below, but I'm going to go ahead and walk through them real quick. So the Community Development Block Grant Aid, that's federal funds, there's an addition of $2 million, and that's some enhanced federal funding that came through. There were also some projects that were delayed in 21 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has the effect of pumping up the FY 2022 spend. There's $2.4 million off from the EDIF for reappropriations of unspent funds. So that was just EDIF monies that moved from 21 to 22. Turn to the next page. On page 7, Job Creation Program Fund, that's JCPF, deleted $1.4 million, the agency did. They're simply reprioritizing some of their money towards the State General Fund that came in and it was recommended by State Finance Counsel. For the impact program, you have the addition of $464,437. That's being spent for workforce AID. There's the TEFI, or Technology Enabled Fiduciary Financial Institutions Fund. The agency is deleting $250,000 from this fund, and they simply indicate that they're still setting up the program. They'll probably just adjust that total amount of expenditures when they get a better handle on what the costs are going to be. For federal trade adjustment assistance, there's an additional $4 million in federal trade adjustment assistance funds for 22, and that was again enhanced funding as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. There's round 3 CRF awards. So this is an addition of $800,000 in CRF funds. The CRF monies for the agency in 21 were allocated to restaurants, theaters, large venue sport, PPE manufacturing, and private colleges, and the $800,000 represents unspent and recouped funding from those, but they would still be allocated for effectively the same purpose. For our federal apprenticeship program, there's the addition of $253,850 in federal funds. There's also the $235,088, all from federal funds for a new state apprenticeship program as well. So that's 2 increases in state apprenticeships. And you're also going to see some increases in the apprenticeship program in 23 as well. For AJLA subscription fees, you have a deletion of $644,845. And that's simply a revised estimate of how much in fees is coming in for that particular program and subscription fees. For the Creative Arts Industries Commission, there's a deletion of $232,450, all from special revenue funds. It's a reduced estimate on CAIC grants. There was some increased federal funding in the previous year, and so you're just sort of seeing some adjustments in that as the money has gone out. For the Athletics Commission, you have a deletion of $101,129 from the Athletics Fee Fund, and that's just reduced expenditures. And the fiscal year 2021 had reduced revenue to the fund due to COVID-19 pandemic, and you're just still seeing sort of those types of events that the Athletics Commission regulates continue to ramp up. For the Kansas Health Professional Opportunities Project, there's a deletion of $2.9 million, all from federal funds from the Kansas Health Professional Opportunity Program. This is a short duration program which is ending in fiscal year 2022. For the Workforce Investment Act, or WIA dislocation, you have deletion of $579,709, all from the Federal Workforce Investment Fund, as training opportunities are projected to decrease. And there's $36,000 in all other various adjustments. And you see some of the stuff that's going on in there. I'm going to touch on the governor's recommendation real quickly so you can see all of 22 together. The governor recommends 136.2, including 26.6 million SGF in 22. The recommendation is an increase of 25.5 million, including 20 million SGF above the 2022 agency revised estimate. There's $20 million of state general fund dollars in here for the moderate income housing program. The moderate income housing program is actually housed within the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation, which is a quasi-governmental entity that regulates the various federal housing programs and also does various types of weatherization and other things. So this would probably likely go out as like aid to locals or other assistance, depending on how they structure that. But it would be governed more by the State Housing Trust Fund regulations and the KHRC. There's an addition of $500,000 all from the federal funds for a Pathway Home 2 grant in 22. This is a new federal program. The purpose of this pilot is to provide eligible incarcerated individuals in state correctional facilities or local or county jails with workforce services prior to release and to continue that training after they are released. And the governor also recommended adding an additional $5 million to the Job Creation Program Fund for economic development in fiscal year 2022. With that, I would stand for questions on the FY 2022 budget before moving to 23.
Questions for Dylan? Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Dylan. I know you've put a lot of work in this, and thank you, Madam Chairman. Would you mind providing the committee with a breakdown of the FTEs? How many are filled? How many are not filled? How many are proposed to be filled? It looks, I read a little bit forward, they're planning on starting quite a few positions. Also, this budget proposal does not follow the law. It is not a performance-based budget.
So we haven't touched on performance measures. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but I will touch on performance measures in a little bit greater detail as we get to the back of this, because it is not incorporated into the overview portion, but it is incorporated into the programs portion. In addition to that, everyone should have received the performance measures guide in their legislative email for all state agencies. So.
Senator Dahl, did you have a question? Okay. Any other questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. EDIF, you have mentioned it. Frequently in the past, we've had a sheet that breaks out the EDIF.
Chair, with permission, I do have a sheet. I didn't bring copies. They will be back up here shortly, and I'll make sure everybody has copies. Total spend from EDIF, total expenditures and transfers for 22 is 45.1, and for 23 it's 35.4, and the difference between those 2 years is largely related to EDIF reappropriations. But yeah, I have 2019 actuals to 21 actuals plus the approved and the revised requests here, and I'll bring copies of those up.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I'll be looking forward to receiving that document. But as far as, since I'm brought EDIF, that's lottery money, correct?
So it is, let me start there. It is the state gaming revenues funds transfers 85% of the first 50 million. That comes to about 42.4 million per fiscal year, and that's regular lottery proceeds. So that's not, there's two basic patterns of lottery money, the way it flows into the state. One is going into the EDIF via regular lottery, think lottery ticket sales, stuff like that. And the other is expanded lottery, which is casinos. Okay, and that flows into the Expanded Lottery Act revenue funds, which are separately organized. But you are correct, it is gaming money. I just want to be specific about which gaming money it was.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I think it's beneficial for the committee to try to get a grasp. And I look at EDIF as like you scratch off your Powerballs, and then you've got the gambling of at the casinos, which is a separate fund. But what in the past, historically, if I remember correctly, the EDIF money has been in the range of 70 to 80 million gross, and then it's distributed. Am I all wet? Or maybe, Madam Chair, I should just wait till we receive this document. Maybe I'll answer some of my questions. But we have so many constituents who frequently, I'm going to use the words, jump on us because we're not using the lottery money for education when it was never designed that way. And it's not, in the scheme of things, that much money. And I guess that's more of a comment, Madam Chair, for the benefit of myself and the committee than it is a question. Unless Mr. Deere wants to weigh in. You're more than welcome to get me straightened out if you can do so, sir.
I don't think there's any straightening out to happen here. The money that actually ends up in the EDIF is only about 42. However, the total amount that flows into the state gaming revenues funds is the number you're talking about $72 million after, and so that's been allocated for some other purposes over the years. But because it's sort of a set or a fixed amount that flows into EDIF, regardless of how much actually comes in receipts.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Any other questions? Don and I do have one. On the moderate income housing, so I understand, that's basically a flow-through. Is that correct? And does that happen every year?
No, this is new. Well, it has happened multiple years, okay? But it's been fixed at $2 million, and it comes from EDIF, okay? And then flows over to the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation, which is not technically a state agency, not really, but their utilization of those funds is restricted by state law. So the state laws that govern the State Housing Trust Fund regulate those. This is different in that it adds $20 million worth of state general fund on top of that $2 million of historical EDIF that has gone to that purpose, thereby increasing that program.
And do we know, I'm just glancing at this, do we know the rationale for the additional 20 million? Why that's being requested?
There was a state housing study that came out, was my understanding, this summer, and I believe there was a reference in the governor's budget amendment, or the governor's budget book that was related to that.
Thank you. Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you again, Dylan. So the 20 million, are there restrictions on how it's spent or oversight that they report back?
So annually, the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation reports back on the expenditures from the State Housing Trust Fund and the status of the Moderate Income Housing Program. In fact, their director, Ryan Vincent, gave that presentation to Appropriations this morning. They talked a little bit about some of the guardrails around those programs and some of the fraud prevention and how those monies are spent. There are some rules in the state. For example, the money has to be spent in rural counties, which is counties with less than 60,000 in population. There's limitations on how much any grant could be. It has to be 400,000 or less in order to maximize those. And some encouragement to use the funds to draw down matching funds, but that's more of an encouragement than a direct requirement.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So is this one-time money, or is it going to be expected? Because that's what happened with K through 12. They had an increase in 2008 and 9, it was 10, 11 from the federal government. I don't remember the exact years, but it was an increase from the federal government, and they expected the state to come back in and fill the coffers. Is that this one-time money, or is it going to be expected every year?
So there's nothing in this document that I've received to indicate whether it's one-time or ongoing. Now, this is a singular appropriation from the state general fund, but I can say, there was definitely a request by the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation to create a sustained revenue stream for this purpose that was stated to appropriations this morning when I was there.
Any other questions before we proceed? Seeing none, Dylan, you may proceed. Dylan, sorry.
All right, I'm going to turn immediately to page 10. So anything that's going to be marked is enhancements, okay, in the list that I'm about to go over. That means that's a new program or new initiative or a substantial expansion of an existing program or initiative. All right, so the agency's revised estimate for 22 is 110.7 with $6.6 million SGF. All right, this is a decrease of 4.9 million or 4.5% below the 22 revised estimate, and the request includes 334.0 FTE positions, which is an increase of 10.5 FTE positions. There was some testimony provided in the House that I think they have 27 vacant FTE positions currently, not including these. However, let me get some additional data for that so I can show you the whole layout on that. So first is Kba Grant Commitments. There's a deletion of 6.6 million all SGF from the funds appropriated to settle the liabilities of the Kansas Bioscience Authority, but these monies were really transferred to reimburse the Job Creation Program Fund for expenses related to the COVID-19. So it's still in that Kba Grants Commitments account of the State General Fund, but really it's related to something else. And it deletes here because you assume that all of the expenditures occurred in the previous year. There's an enhancement to the KIT-KER program that adds $2 million all EDIF to increase funding for the Kansas Industrial Training and Retraining programs. And I have additional detail on all of these enhancements starting on page 13. But I'm just going to sort of go over them quickly now so that you can see what they all are. And then when you need more detail, you just let me know. There's an enhancement for an agency grant writer position that adds $93,000 and 1 FTE. There's an enhancement to the registered apprenticeship program that adds $500,000 worth of EDIF. There's an enhancement to the Office of Broadband Development that adds $1 million of EDIF. There's an enhancement to the Kansas Tourism Division that adds $1 million, all EDF and 5 FTE positions. There's an enhancement to the Office of Innovation Program from the Office of Innovation Program Manager. And you're going to see several. They were sort of broken down up in the submission, but there's several changes to the Office of Innovation that are present here. There's an enhancement for a Salesforce data integrity analyst that adds $99,547 and 1 FTE. There's an enhancement for a small business research and development grants that adds $1 million all EDIF. And there's an enhancement for a lead research analyst, $81,161 and 1 FTE. It's a new data and research unit that's being proposed to be created. There's an enhancement to the cybersecurity program manager that adds $105,693 and 1 FTE position. This is in the Office of Innovation. It's not like an operations position. It's more like providing cybersecurity services and training for private industry is more what it's focused on.
Just a moment. Senator Tyson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Dylan, part of the performance-based budget issue is that they tell us why these are being created through legislation, through what all of a sudden is demanding these new positions, new functions, Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I appreciate it. If you would be all right with the chairman, could I defer to the agency on a response to that question? All right, thank you.
Okay, we'll wait to hear from the agency. Continue, Dylan.
You're welcome. Moving to the Salesforce software update, there's an additional $200,000 of EIF to update the CRM software. There's an enhancement for an Office of Innovation Administrative Assistant. There's an enhancement for work-based learning, which adds $714,000 EDF to support work-based learning intermediaries. These are individuals who are supposed to expand the existing working relationship between education, business, and industry and economic development entities. There's a deletion of $402,302 from the retain program. It's a federal program. The program is intended to establish relationships between workforce systems and medical service delivery systems to develop processes to help individuals who suffered a debilitating illness or injury return to work. Phase 1 of the grant program ends in December 2021. So that's just a federal program that's coming to an end. But however, they do indicate that they anticipate that there'll be a new phase it's released. And so you'll probably see a budget adjustment next year. For round 3 CRF awards, this is simply deleting out the money that was added in the previous year. There's a deletion of $4.8 million off of special revenue funds for the impact program bonds. That's related to bond retirement of those impact bonds. And that last payment will be in 23. For the job creation program fund, you have the addition of $4.3 million from the JCPF. The additional SGF appropriation from 21 will not be expanded, and the funding will shift back to the JCPF. There's deleting of $2.5 million in reappropriations. So when you see a reappropriation in a previous year, you just basically have to reverse that out in the following year. $550,000 for impact program service fees, and that's just the depletion of those funds. Deletion of $300,000 in the AJLA, America's Job Link Alliance subscription fee revenue. There's a deletion of $172,936 for the Kansas Health Opportunities Project, and that's a federal program. And there's about $107,000 off of special revenue funds for various minor adjustments and revised estimates in federal programs. Now, I'll touch on, once again, I'll touch on the governor's recommendation because there's some additional adjustments, large adjustments in the governor's recommendation. The governor's recommendation is an increase of $233.8 million, including $205.1 million SGF above the agency's request. And it does also have an additional 1.0 FTE position. There's $700,000 for that Pathway Home 2 grant. That's a federal program that we discussed in FY22 about incarcerated individuals. There's an addition of $10 million, all SGF for higher education grants, and the grants will be focused on economic development. There's an addition of $27.9 million, all from the Job Creation Program Fund for economic development in 23. I should note that the Job Creation Program Fund is special revenue funds, but it's a revenue diversion from the state general fund from withholding taxes. And this action would raise the total amount of the annual cap on those transfers, which has been set at $3.5 million to this $27.9 million amount. There's university grant funding projects, adds $195 million, all SGF for university grant funding projects. The intention for those funds was that they would have a one-to-one match with new dollars. And additionally, $20 million would be earmarked for the NIAR, or Wichita State University National Institute for Aviation Research. And I think there's going to be a presentation on that tomorrow for the committee. For Advantage Kansas, there's an addition of $125,000, all SGF, and one FTE position for a project director at Advantage Kansas. And that is a coordinating council that's supposed to help align education with state agencies and business needs. Turning to page 13, like I said, you can see a lot of additional detail on those various enhancements, but I think in the agency presentation, they're going to provide some additional detail first. So rather than you listen to me talk about their enhancements, it might be better if you just hear them talk about it. But with that, I would stand for questions on the FY 2023 budget before talking about a little bit about performance measures.
Any questions? Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dallin just had a question up front on the item number 1 on page 10, the Kba Grant Commitments, talking about the liabilities of the KBA. Is there any outstanding exposure still left with that organization, and to what type of dollars potentially are we talking about? Thank you, Madam Chair.
I haven't seen the most recent exposure report. I think it's less than $5 million. The question is how much of that is ever going to come due. So there's obligations that are contractual, okay, but that also is the responsibility of private enterprise to meet sort of benchmarks. So the question then becomes, will these companies ever meet those benchmarks, and will it become necessary to do that distribution of funds? The building is still owned as well, so there's building maintenance costs. I don't think that's been sold yet, not last time I checked. But that's kind of where we are on the KBA. There's specific language written into the appropriations bill that was proposed by this committee last year that says that basically they can draw down monies from the state general fund as those obligations become available. And like I said, this money is in the Kba grants. It's in that Kansas Bioscience Authority grant commitments account of the state general fund, but really it was related to JCPF stuff and expenditures from the Job Creation Program Fund.
Any other? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A few questions. I'll try to be really brief. On back to page 5, I was noticing the salaries and wages. This is running from fiscal year 21 through fiscal year 23. We can all see it goes from 19.2 to actually 23 million, and then to 24 million. Do you have knowledge, or do we need to ask the agency about the salaries and wages constantly increase? Is that because of added personnel or just?
It's less related to added personnel and more vacant positions, sort of shrink as in the FY21 budget. So the budget for a certain number of positions, they didn't fully fill those positions, and so that's going to cause that salaries and wage change. But there's some other changes that are happening between FY21 and FY22. If you look on page 9, it provides a little bit of detail on sort of that movement between the actual year and the 22.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There are a significant number of FTEs in this budget, and as far as the university matching grant program, you mentioned on page 15 that is 195 million SGF, and 20 of it is for WSU, aviation program. So that would mean that 175 is for the other universities?
Presumably, that is correct. I don't have actually a lot of detail on these particular enhancements. They came in with the governor's recommendation, so questions on those should probably be better for the agency. But I don't. It's not really clear exactly in the bill language what the sort of guardrails and restrictions around those funds are.
Yes, Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And one more question again on page 15. Number 18, at $125,000 and 1 FTE for an executive director for the Advantage Kansas program. Does that indicate to us that 1 FTE, that ED, that executive director, is $125,000 salary and benefits?
That's salary and benefits for that position. And I think so that's salary and benefits, so you can reduce that number by about 27%, roughly, and that would give you a rough idea what the salary is. But if you'd like, I can look up the salary that was submitted as part of the enhancement.
Where do you apply?
I would not.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would follow up to the senator's questions. Last year, we tried to run an amendment that would have limited the FTEs available to this department. That would have decreased that slope considerably, wouldn't it, if those would have come off?
Certainly. If it had reduced the number of FTEs, I would note that there's been some changes in the way the budget works. It used to be that agencies had strict FTE limitations, which were written into the bill. So it would basically say, hey, this is how many FTE you're allowed to have. There's no longer an FTE limitation written into the bill. So even when you delete FTEs here, it doesn't actually restrict an agency by law from adding additional FTEs. They would simply need the permission from the Division of Budget and the Division of Personnel Services in order to recreate those FTE positions. They would be restricted by salaries and wages, by total, you still have to stay inside your salary, not your salary cap, but your total expenditure cap.
So if I may, Madam Chairman, I think that it's become even more difficult for legislators to get a grasp of how these budgets are being worked, may I say, or handled. Nothing on you, Dylan. You're giving us the information that you have. I appreciate that. Also, the grants that we're going to be applying for, hoops that we have to jump through in order to get that money. Could you get that to the committee? I know you might not be able to answer that.
Sure, and you're referring to the two new grant programs, the 195 and the 10, and so you just want the sort of guidelines around those?
Yes, I want to know what the agency is signing us up for federal money. I don't know if most legislators are aware of it. We have a tendency to sign up for programs, and it causes heartburn. I can tell you one with the Department of Agriculture years ago. We have a statement in our statute that says federal inspections, state inspections will be greater than or equal to federal inspections. And we did that. We've put businesses out just so that we would gain $3 million from federal money. There are consequences to these hoops that we jump through. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I should be clear that these grants are state money, so the 195 of the 10 are state, but if I understand the Senator's question correctly, if federal funds are used to do the one-to-one match, those federal funds would come with certain requirements. All right.
Seeing no other questions, Darlene, you may proceed.
Thank you very much. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the performance measures. And like I said, I think that the agency will also talk a little bit about performance measures as well. So I'm going to start on page 17. And just because I passed out a performance measures guide before, but I want to show how it's integrated into the existing budget analysis. So if you look at the administration program, it's going to give you a quick chart to show you what the historical expenditures are for that program. Then it will list the statutes which allow for that to exist. Then it'll go for the various program goals which are identified by the agency. Give a little bit of background. Turning to the next page, you have administration performance measures that are on here, as well as the financing. This is very similar to the performance measures guide that we passed out. Anything that's identified with an asterisk, okay, that means that's not a performance measure that's used in the governor's budget book, but it was one that was submitted to us over the summer, so we went ahead and integrated it into the budget analysis. One I'd like to point out on here is broadband. That's the number of premises connected. You can see that huge increase in the 21, and that's due to that influx of federal funding that allowed that big surge in the Office of Broadband. But then it drops back to about 7,500 premises, about 10,000 premises in 22 and 23. There is a large sum of additional federal broadband money coming in as part of ARPA. That has not been integrated into this budget, and you're probably going to see some changes that are associated with that as well. I don't think the full spending priorities around those funds have yet been determined. The Office of Recovery might have some additional information on that. There's not a lot of performance measures for administration programs because they're more overhead oriented, but if you turn to page 19, you can see the number of jobs created or retained through business development efforts, 14.5, 17.2, target is 21,000 in 22 and 21.5 in 23. If you look at private capital investment in billions in Kansas in the Commerce Program, it goes from 1.4 to 4.3, and then 2.7 and 2.71 and 22 is at targets. And number of jobs created or retained through business recruitment, it's going from the 2,800 range to the 7,000 range. And the number of jobs created or retained through retention or expansion efforts going from 11,000 to 14, so a little less of an increase on that one. Once again, I would encourage the committee as they look through these measures, if they don't feel like that particular measure meets their needs or helps them evaluate the budget, now would be a good time to provide that feedback to the agency, and so we can continue to update the measures with new measures as necessary. Moving forward on business development to workforce services on page 21. So once again, you see jobs created or retained going from about 12.3 to about 14.7, and the number served with job placement services, 72,000, 19,000, 45,000, and 47,000. So, and then you can see some new measures that we put on here for job seekers users on the kw.com and number of job orders or job seeker resumes. The job seeker resumes are largely related to some amendments to unemployment law in Kansas that requires those individuals seeking unemployment to have a resume on file with the Department of Commerce. Community development, Moving forward, on page 23, the number of grant applications received by community development programs going from about 296 to 370, and the number of housing units rehabilitated, 70 and 120. So you see some increases in there. Anytime you see dashes, that means this is a new measure that was developed in the last year, so they don't have any historical data on those. Moving on to international business on page 25. International business is sort of a new program. That's why you see the big spike in FY 2020. It used to be part of general business development, and it was broken out as a separate program. So you have capital investment in millions, looking at about 40 million. Successful projects still staying at 3, and jobs created at about 150. So you're not seeing a lot of movement. You notice that, so there's not a lot of, I mean, there is some investment in this area, but it's not being reflected in measures. And if you look at tourism on page 27, you have the amount of statewide transient guest tax collections going from about 41 million and sort of staying flat through 40 million. Visitor spending in the state in billions going from 7.3 to 7. Number of visitors to Kansas, 36, it's about flat, maybe even slightly declining, according to the data. And I was going to touch real briefly, we can skip over debt service. You can see that's, and go to capital improvements. The agency is requesting $230,000 off from special revenue funds, including $130,000 for re-roofing and facade replacement at the Garden City Job Center. And there's also $100,000 for plumbing repairs at the Topeka Workforce Center. Here in the Senate, most of the capital improvements expenditures, I'll go ahead and mention them to you, but they're actually handled by the Joint Committee on State Building Construction, and then we'll bind those up and send those on over to the Full Ways and Means Committee. And the agency is requesting $100,000 off in special revenue funds for replacement of the HVAC controls at the Topeka Workforce Center. And so since you don't have two projects, it's a $130,000 reduction. I would note at the Topeka Job Center debt service, that's that final payment on that debt service that's being reflected in that line for FY 2021. And with that, I would stand for questions on any portion of the Commerce budget before we have representatives of the Department of Commerce to answer questions. We have Bob North and Sherry Renfro. Sherry is the Chief Fiscal Officer for the Department of Commerce, and Bob North is their Chief Legal Counsel.
Okay, any final questions for Dylan? We caught all of that perfectly, Dylan.
I know it was fast, but it's a big budget, and I know you want to talk to the agency, so.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you. Okay, next we will have Sherry Renfro, from the Chief Fiscal Officer from the Department of Commerce. Welcome to the committee, Sherry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, for allowing me to testify on behalf of our budget proposal for the Department of Commerce. Again, I'm Sherry Renfro, the Chief Fiscal Officer at the department. I believe our budget reflects how our agency is using our available fiscal resources wisely while executing a sustainable and successful business development strategy, as well as still investing in programs and strategies that are needed to encourage further growth in Kansas and communities in the state as a whole. 2021 was another record-setting year for the department, with nearly $3.8 billion in capital investment announced by private sector businesses, which led to nearly 13,483 new and retained jobs through 321 economic development projects throughout the state. We are also proud of our many community-based achievements this past year. Participation grew in the highly successful Main Street program. The first round of broadband acceleration grants has spurred needed projects to increase connectivity in underserved areas. We had efforts to focus on housing options across Kansas. And also the reorganization of Kansas tourism under Commerce was another important step forward this year. And finally, our Workforce Services Division continues to implement multifaceted efforts to strengthen the workforce and connect Kansas with good jobs statewide. Based on our successes and increased demand for our programs, our goals for individuals, businesses, and communities to achieve prosperity in Kansas, we are seeking the 13 budget enhancements and the funding for the 3 new initiatives, as well as increasing the cap on our job creation fund transfer to help strengthen our efforts. I'll briefly go over our budget enhancements for fiscal year 23. We are seeking $2 million for the Kansas Industrial Training and Kansas Industrial Retraining, our KIT-KER programs. KIT-KER are training programs that are designed to help Kansas companies create new jobs and retain jobs by offsetting training costs. At current levels of funding, companies receive far less financial assistance to workforce training cost share assistance than a decade ago. Currently, Commerce is only able to provide $340 per job in training assistance. This additional funding would make the state more competitive. Peer states are funding workforce incentives at average awards ranging from $1,200 to $3,000 per job. Furthermore, to continue support and grow the Kansas workforce, we are requesting $500,000 for the Registered Apprenticeship Program and $714,000 for supportive work-based learning. Registered apprenticeships play an important role in Kansas by helping Kansas employers and communities bridge the gap between employment and education. Additionally, employers have the luxury of, quote, growing their own talent and training the skills that are most important to them. The budget enhancement of $714,000 for work-based learning intermediaries would provide regional work-based learning programs in each school district in all 5 local development regions. Work-based learning programs act as a liaison between employers and school districts to facilitate internships, apprenticeships, and career shadowing opportunities. Kansas is currently conducting a cross-agency work-based learning regional pilot program that will serve as a model to scale high-quality work-based learning across Kansas and develop a statewide system. Our next enhancement request is to support the Office of Broadband Development. Throughout the course of the pandemic, we truly saw the need and value for high-quality, affordable connectivity. A $1 million enhancement would allow the office to continue to wrap up capacity to execute on newly established state broadband strategy and to deploy a large volume of projects and funding that is available. Projects and programs designed to expand broadband to all corners of the state. Based on the significant federal funding that is available, the office will need additional staff to support the programs we expect to create in the near term, as well as to cover critical mapping resources. I should note on the business analysis, we are requesting 5 FTE under broadband, not the tourism department, so there was a correction on that. So the Office of Broadband Development was not the only office in the department to make strides this last year. Kansas tourism experienced a rebirth as it became an economic development driver. We are seeking a $1 million enhancement for Kansas Tourism Division to allow tourism to multiply its current successful To the Stars marketing campaign efforts and strategically expand reach and saturation. This will result in increased support to the Kansas tourism industry, increased visitation to and throughout the state, and increased sales and guest tax collections for the state and local communities. In 2021, the department also launched the Office of Innovation as a result of the Kansas Framework for Growth, which identified innovation as one of its 4 pillars critical to the future of the Kansas economy. The Office of Innovation is taking a lead role in rebuilding the network of local support partners to increase the capacity and expertise that Kansas can provide to our innovative, high-growth entrepreneurs and small businesses. We are requesting 5 budget enhancements related to the Office of Innovation. First, we request $1 million to support the Small Business Research and Development Acceleration Grant Program within the Office of Innovation. This grant program will support Kansas small businesses partnering with Kansas public higher education institutions that are conducting research and development. Small businesses can receive a 50-50 matching grant up to $25,000 for research and development costs at public institutions. This budget enhancement will fund 40 grants at $25,000 each. Also within the Office of Innovation, we are seeking 4 positions: a cybersecurity program manager, agency grant writer, program manager, and an administrative assistant. As the department continues to become data-driven, it has become clear that upgrades to the agency CRM software is desperately needed. Commerce is requesting $200,000 to do a complete overhaul of our Salesforce system. This overhaul will allow us to address the lack of capacity around collecting data analytics and the management of data at the agency. In addition to the overhaul of Salesforce, we are also seeking a position for a Salesforce data integrity analyst position within the data and research unit. The primary responsibility of this position will be to manage, clean, and verify the data quality within the Salesforce database, and to improve the overall accuracy of agency data using advanced computer science methods. Currently, we do not have an employee dedicated to managing our CRM software. And lastly, we request a position for a lead research analyst, which will focus on data and research needs within the agency and address our lack of capacity around collecting data and managing data analytics at the agency. And in addition to these budget enhancements, the governor is also recommending funding for 3 new initiatives, which includes the University Economic Development Grant Challenge, the Moderate Income Housing, and Economic Development Grants for Higher Education. In the governor's budget for fiscal year 22, it includes $20 million to support moderate income housing. This program is a highly successful program that provides funding for affordable housing options and helps to address housing needs within Kansas. An increase to moderate housing income funding is one of the needs identified within the Housing Assessment Report, and this investment will help supplement the current allocation of $2 million, which is roughly 69 cents per Kansas resident for housing. In fiscal year 23, the Economic Development Challenge includes $195 million in one-time grant funding to Regents institutions for projects that demonstrate a significant economic benefit to the community to address a timely or unique economic need for the state. This will enable universities to work with donors to develop proposals for state funding initiatives that will have significant long-term economic benefit to the state, and these funds will be matched dollar for dollar by universities with private funds. Each of these grants will be an excellent private-public partnership, which will maximize the investments made by taxpayers. And this fund will be housed within Commerce as it aligns with initiatives in our framework for growth. Also included in the $195 million allocation is $20 million for the National Institute for Aviation Research at Wichita State, which is seed funding to help them start construction on the hangar. And lastly, in the fiscal year 23 budget, the governor recommends $10 million to support economic development grants for higher education. These grants will focus on aligning university economic development initiatives within the framework for growth in order to spur commercialization, innovation, and workforce development. And lastly, I'd like to touch on the Job Creation Fund cap increase. As you know, the Job Creation Fund is our deal closing fund for the state and used to meet the needs of recruiting and retaining companies to grow the Kansas economy. JCF dollars are very efficient, as legislative post-audit determined the state receives a return on investment of $39.60 for every dollar spent. Funding JCF at the requested level will allow the state to better meet existing urgent needs and position us to take advantage of future opportunities. The department recommends increasing the cap on the transfer to JCF to $8.5 million in fiscal year 22 and $35 million in fiscal year 23. The cap has previously been set at $3.5 million for several past years. And I thank the committee for allowing me to provide the opportunity to testify, and I will stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Sherry. Questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The state budget has a significant surplus right now, and you've laid out several requests. Are there any additional you would like to add, because we're going to be considering this budget, any additional you'd like to add to your wish list, since we've got?
Not at this time. We have quite an extensive wish list right now, so we don't have any other we don't have any other asks right now.
Yes, Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to make certain that we weren't missing something, because we're looking at a lot of taxpayer money that the agency is requesting, and I believe it's ridiculous. A lot of these requests are absurd, but I do have a question. According to the information in the budget analysis on page 29, Mr. Deere indicated that the bond or the debts will be paid off in fiscal year 2023. So it's sort of a two-part question. Where's the money coming from to pay the bonds? And then after the bonds are paid off, I guess that money would just blend into the agency's budget?
That money comes from a transfer, is it from withholding tax? And so once that is paid off, we won't receive that transfer anymore. The agency does not receive that money that was used for the bond payments.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not a question, just a comment. I'm incredibly bullish about Department of Commerce. I mean, when I see where this place was back in 2014, and I really got to hand it to the new management, as it were. I mean, I think when you look at the different competing economic interests in this state, I mean, those interests are as diverse as basically the geography in this state. And I think what we have put in place, when you look at the Office of Rural Prosperity, when you look at the broadband development, when you look at the revitalization of the Main Street program, to me, those are all awesome things. And the other thing that I really like about this, and I don't know if some of you guys know this or not, but basically I'm starting a small manufacturing enterprise, and I'm as I look at potential, who knows, for possible overseas sales of our products, there's nothing out there. And the fact that you guys have come along now and set up an international division, I mean, you know, we talk about, you know, basically bringing new jobs to Kansas, bringing new companies to Kansas, but there's this whole separate concept in my mind called economic gardening, whatever the buzzword is, where basically we look at really leveraging what's existing there for existing businesses and trying to find new markets. And the fact that you are putting investments into that, to me, that's just an incredible opportunity. That's some real low-hanging fruit that existing companies already committed to Kansas, already employing Kansas folks, okay, can have access to, because those international markets and trying to get there and figuring out the licensing requirements and that stuff, I mean, that's a formidable challenge. So I really like the panoply of programs. I can also tell you, though, there are still barriers to bringing up a manufacturing enterprises. There's still gaps as you grow those, as you try to grow your business, and I look forward to working with you guys to fill in those holes, what remains. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't know if my questions would be for you or Mr. North, so I'll go ahead and ask them. And you mentioned Salesforce. Isn't that a application that was developed by a contractor that is purchased, or is that an in-house application?
No, it's a third-party application that
By
we purchased.
Accenture, is that correct?
Not sure who produces Salesforce, but many companies use them nationwide.
Right, and you sole source that, or did you put that out for bid when you decided?
They're available off a state contract, that a provider that can provide Salesforce, so we use the state contract.
Right, so, okay, you went right into where I wanted you to. Why would just this department and agency be asking for funds and resources to upgrade the Salesforce system?
Well, Salesforce is our, CRM management software, and we work with many companies, and we need the data from the companies to maintain the relationships and get additional data from them. I suppose there's many different types of software that can do CRM management. Salesforce is the one that we have chosen to use.
But thank you, Madam Chair, that didn't answer the question as to why you would be paying. You acted like it was a rewrite of the system. If I should have written down what you said, because it wasn't just an upgrade, or maybe it was an upgrade, but the implication was that your department would be paying for development.
When we first used Salesforce, it was set up, and then as we were using it, continuing to use it, we're finding that some of the applications are not what we are needing. So we are needing to do a rewrite of the software to get it to where to tailor it to Commerce's needs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you'd be paying for custom development. Thank you. I also, the other question that I have is on the performance-based budget section. Madam Chair? This is exactly why we've been asking for this for years. I'll go to the international business. And I do know that there was international business efforts in the past with other administrations. But what I find interesting, whether it's the past administration or the current administration, that exists because it's discretionary. So you guys just decided to make up a program?
Well, we've always had international business within our business development department, and we've split it out to its own separate division as it was previously.
By what authority, if I may, Madam Chair, do you have that?
That I'm not aware.
Mr. North, would you care
If
to?
I may have Bob North come up.
Certainly. Welcome, and just please state your name
Hi.
for the record.
Bob North, Chief Counsel at the Department of Commerce. So I believe years ago, there was a international division, and the secretary has the authority to kind of organize the agency as she or he feels fit. So the semantics of, is it a division created by statute, or is it an organizational work group? I don't know if that's the question. There has been an enhanced emphasis on international trade, and 5-6 years ago, we might have had 1 or 2 people working on international trade issues, and since that time, we've enhanced those efforts and have got, I would say, a half dozen or so people working on international trade. And Senator, I'm not sure if that answered your question precisely, but.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It points out an issue that we have with state government. Years ago, you wouldn't have any idea about this, but I was in an agency meeting, and they literally asked for a set of books for the legislature and a set of books to actually do their work. And I feel like we don't get the complete picture, and this helps demonstrate that we have agencies and departments creating their own programs and own, without statutory or any authority. So I do appreciate this. I would also ask, like the Advantage Kansas program, you're asking for a new person. Which performance-based portion of the budget does that fall under? I don't find it in any of these. So there's not a match either. I mean, you took a good effort, but I don't think the task is complete. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure, and I'll comment to that specifically, is the framework for growth that we've, worked on for several years. It identified opportunities for the state to improve its economic development efforts, and a lot of these small business related programs and these entrepreneurship programs and these proof of concept based programs were in response to identified shortfalls in the state's competitiveness to help small business. And so I think with respect to that individual position, Senator, the idea is that our universities and colleges are a tremendous potential economic driver, and we need to do a better job of connecting the academic institutions and the research institutions and the rest of our colleges and universities with economic development initiatives. And so that's the goal there.
Senator Holland, did you have okay, I'm sorry, I thought you did. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony, committee. I will draw your attention, we do have written testimony from Kansas Workforce One and the Kansas Board of Regents from Blake Flanders, written only in your packets. Seeing no other business on the agenda for today. Oh, committee, we will be discussing this and taking recommendations tomorrow. So please look over the materials. And with that, we are adjourned.